The chessboard was mahogany and ivory, hand-carved in Vienna, a gift from a man whose name Victoria Hale had not spoken aloud in 4 years. She kept it on the conference table on the 50th floor, not because she played often, but because it reminded her of something she had decided long ago. That every game had a winner, and she intended always to be that person. Outside, Manhattan was disappearing. Snow came down in curtains, the kind of heavy, windless snow that erased the difference between buildings and sky, that buried the noise of the city so thoroughly the world seemed to have exhaled and gone still. It was nearly midnight. The rest of Hale Capital's offices were dark. Victoria sat alone in the glass-walled conference room with a cup of tea gone cold beside her, and the chessmen arranged in a problem she had been working for 20 minutes. A tactical puzzle from a 1960s Soviet tournament book, one that supposedly had no clean solution. She was beginning to think the Soviets were right. Her reflection hovered in the floor-to-ceiling window, translucent against the white dark outside. Tailored charcoal blazer, hair pulled back without a strand loose, the kind of stillness in her face that her executive assistant privately described as the expression of someone who has decided you no longer exist. She was 36 years old. She had built Hale Capital from a single fund to a firm managing $9 billion. She had done this without a partner, without a mentor, without the safety net of a family name. She had done it by being the smartest person in the room and by making sure everyone knew it. She moved the Queen's bishop. Wrong. She could see it the moment her fingers left the piece. The door opened. She did not look up. Building maintenance had been working the elevators tonight, a routine inspection. She had been notified, which was why she had stayed late rather than fight the slow wait for a car. She expected the sound of a vacuum, the efficient indifference of someone doing a job. She did not expect footsteps that stopped. She looked up. The man standing in the doorway was wearing dark work clothes, the kind without a logo, carrying a mop handle at a slight angle like someone who had forgotten he was holding it. He was looking at the chessboard, not at her, at the board. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that had been handsome once and was now something more interesting, weathered at the corners, with lines around the eyes that came from squinting into difficult light rather than from laughter. His hair was dark, going gray at the temples. He looked, she thought, like a man who had once been somewhere important and had since decided that somewhere important was not where he wanted to be. "The bishop move loses the endgame," he said. Victoria set down her tea. "I'm sorry? You just moved the bishop to F4. He had not moved from the doorway. "It looks like pressure. But in 7 moves, white is down a rook and there's no recovery. The puzzle wants you to find the quiet move the knight to H3. It doesn't look like anything, but it changes everything." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the board. The knight to H3. She ran it forward in her mind 3 moves. 5, 8, and felt something cold move through her chest that was not the air conditioning. He was right. "You play?" she said. "I used to." He said it the way people say things they mean to close the door on, and she should have let him. She would think about that later, how the night would have gone differently if she had simply thanked him and gone back to her puzzle. Instead, she heard herself say the thing that had been circling in the back of her mind for months. The thing she said in the sharp, crystallized moments when loneliness took the shape of recklessness. "Play me then." He looked at her directly for the first time. His eyes were gray, the color of winter water. "I have a floor to finish," he said. "I'll have it cleaned twice over tomorrow. Sit down." A long pause. Something moved across his face, amusement, maybe, or the ghost of it. "You should know I play to finish games," he said. "So do I." He set down the mop handle against the wall and walked into the room. They arranged the pieces in silence. Victoria reset the board with the efficiency of long habit, and she noticed that he moved his pieces the same way, quickly, without ceremony, the way people do when the formalities of setup have long since stopped meaning anything to them. He sat across from her, His hands were large and still on the table. "What are we playing for?" he asked. She had meant to say nothing. She had meant to simply play, to satisfy whatever strange competitive impulse had made her ask. But the snow outside was very white, and the room was very quiet, and she was tired of games that meant nothing. "Beat me," she said, and heard her own voice come out cooler than she intended, carrying the faint edge of a dare. "And I'll marry you." The silence that followed lasted approximately 4 seconds. Then he said, "All right," not surprised, not amused. As though it were a reasonable thing. As though she had proposed a wager on something simple and he had agreed. Victoria Hale, who had not been caught off guard in a professional setting in 11 years, felt something stir in her chest that she could not immediately name. She opened with the Queen's Gambit. He declined it. His name, she would learn later, was Daniel Mercer, 38 years old. Originally from Pittsburgh, the kind of neighborhood where the houses are narrow and the winters are long, and people develop a particular relationship with difficulty, not broken by it, not defeated, but changed in the way metal changes when it's worked. Denser, quieter, capable of holding an edge. He had been 3 things in his life. First, a prodigy. At 14, he had the highest junior chess rating in Pennsylvania. At 17, a national qualifier. At 20, a ranked player with a real shot at something serious. A player whose name appeared in the kinds of columns that track the emergence of exceptional minds. He had played in tournaments in Amsterdam and Prague. He had once sat across a board from a grandmaster for 4 hours and made the man sweat. Then he had been a husband. He had met Claire at 22, at a community fundraiser where he had been doing a chess demonstration. She was a nurse practitioner with quick hands and the kind of laugh that made rooms tilt toward her. He had loved her immediately and completely, which was the one thing in his life he had never strategized about. He had quit competitive play the year they married, because the travel was incompatible with the life they were building, because the prize money was unreliable, because he had decided quietly, without regret, without telling anyone it was a sacrifice, that being home was worth more than any title he might win on the road. Then he had been a father. Lily arrived when he was 29, small and fierce and respiratory fragile in a way that required a particular kind of constant vigilance. She had been diagnosed with severe bronchospastic asthma at 18 months, the kind that did not respond well to standard protocols, the kind that required a specialist in Boston and a careful accounting of every environmental variable. She had her mother's laugh. She had her father's eyes. Claire's illness had come on gradually, which was in some ways worse than sudden. A progressive autoimmune condition that the doctors had many long words for and few real answers about. 3 years of slow decline, of Daniel working whatever work he could find that allowed him to be home, to be the one who handled school pickups and medical appointments and the nighttime coughing fits that required measured response rather than panic. He had learned, in those years, to do several things at once. To be present without being overwhelmed. To be competent without making competence look like heroism, to keep the ordinary world intact around Lily so she would not be frightened by the weight of what was happening. Claire had died in October, 3 years ago. Lily had been 5. She had not fully understood, and then she had understood too much, and then she had arrived with the strange resilience of children at a place of acceptance that Daniel found both heartening and privately devastating, because it meant the world had moved on from something that still occupied the entirety of his own chest. He had taken the maintenance job at Hale Capital's building 8 months ago because it paid reliably, started at 10 p.m., and ended at 6 a.m., which meant he was home when Lily woke, and home when she came back from school, and home for the afternoon hours that were the most dangerous for her respiratory episodes. The night shift, the invisible hours. He was, in every meaningful sense, a man who had chosen to make himself invisible in order to keep someone else safe. He did not talk about the chess. He had not played a rated game in 15 years. At the maintenance company's orientation, They had asked him to list hobbies for a team-building exercise, the kind of low-stakes social ritual that large facilities management companies deployed to create the illusion of community among people who worked alone in the dark. He had written reading. He had not written chess. The game was his, privately, the way certain things belong to a person not because they're secret, but because they exist at a frequency the world around them cannot receive. Lily knew he played.